The Philadelphia 76ers are a goddamn joke. And at this point, you know that. At this point, you've heard this plenty. Them losing to the Atlanta Hawks in that series in any context was pretty much unacceptable, especially in the fashion that they did it. However, I don't really need to elaborate on this further. I already did this in my reaction to Game 7 over on my second channel that you can watch, but you've heard plenty already about how terrible the Sixers losing was and what that means for their history of their rebuild and all of that. But in today's video, I want to talk about what they're going to do going forward, because even with it being ultimately their fault that they're here, they still have to get themselves out of this hole that they've dug. So in today's video, it's just like every other What's Next video. I'm going to explore what is next and what this team should do in this offseason. So let's get into it. Before continuing on with this video, about half of the people that watch these videos are not subscribed, so if you fall into that 50%, then subscribe. Also drop a like on this video, it only takes 1 second and makes a massive difference. I'm trying to hit 200K on this channel by the end of the year, so your subscription would be much appreciated. Also go subscribe to my second channel where I do post-game recaps for every playoff game. I'm going to be doing this for the new conference finals now, so go check me out over there as well. So there are two obvious things that need to happen this offseason that are pretty much going to be the sole focus of this video. And those are trading Ben Simmons and firing Doc Rivers. Now, to be nice to Doc Rivers, which I don't have to be, but I'm going to be, because I generally try to be charitable, Doc Rivers is not terrible. He was terrible in this series. He ran a 10-man rotation in a Game 7, which is unacceptable. However, he's not the worst coach in the world. But it's not a good look, and sometimes you have to be reactionary to a single series and a single situation in the NBA. That's just kind of how it works sometimes, especially when there is a really good coaching market out there, with Rick Carlisle being the guy at the top of the market. So fire Doc Rivers, hire Rick Carlisle, and instantly you're going to be much better off. Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid was always an extraordinarily flawed duo. That was pretty much obvious from the get-go. Even then, there was at least somewhat of a belief that eventually Ben Simmons would develop a jump shot, and that would allow the awkward fit to at least semi-subside. There'd still be some stepping on toes, but it wouldn't be just a entirely flawed duo. It would mostly get the job done. And in spite of the fact that Ben Simmons obviously never did develop that jump shot, not even close, it wasn't entirely bad. They still managed to make it work to the extent that they were the top seed in the conference, and they were not a terrible duo. However, we see time and time again now that when the playoffs come around, Ben Simmons often folds, and this is mostly due to himself, but also due to the fact that this duo is not compatible. In an ideal world for Ben Simmons, assuming that he would stop being a bitch and drive to the basket, he would be in a situation where there are 4 shooters around him, and not a post-up big man. This is not to blame Joel Embiid for Ben Simmons' failures, because his failures are his own. Do not make any mistake there. However, there's a reason why people have talked about Ben Simmons or Joel Embiid in the past. It's obvious who you trade now, but there's a reason people have talked about one of them being traded for a long time. That's because they do not work together to nearly the extent that you would like them to. It was pretty close to obvious that this duo needed to be broken up a pretty decent amount of time ago. However, after this series, it's not pretty obvious, it is blatantly fucking obvious. This can no longer continue. Ben Simmons having this series versus the Hawks, the fact that he was just an offensive negative even in spite of his playmaking, just downright unacceptable, and he needs to be put in a situation where he is able to better play to his strengths and not add weaknesses to a team like the Sixers. Now, as for the actual trades, there have been trades proposed such as Zach Levine for Ben Simmons. No thank you. Ben's value, I would have taken that deal in a heartbeat like a year ago, But Zach's value has increased and Ben's has drastically decreased. That's the unfortunate circumstance of the fact that you do have to trade Ben Simmons, that you are choosing to trade him now when his value is at an all-time low. So as for some trades I can actually see happening, CJ and Robert Covington for Ben Simmons and Seth Curry. The Blazers would be getting Ben, who I'd be playing pretty much at power forward, trying to get him in that Draymond Green role with Dame as the primary initiator. I think he'd be fantastic in that role, and it's something I've been trying to see happen for quite a while now, and that would be the perfect situation for that. Plus you get Seth Curry, who can at least replace the spacing of CJ. Obviously not nearly as good as CJ, but there's something there. You lose a 3-and-D forward, but overall I think you become a better, more well-rounded team that's not the same carbon copy of what the Blazers have been every fucking year. For the Sixers, CJ's a really good shot creator. Robert Covington is back as the token 3-and-D player of the Sixers, and that lineup would now be CJ, Robert Covington, Tobias, and Embiid, and then you have to figure out the point guard spot, but that's already a really damn good starting spot. And CJ and Tobias might be a little redundant. They're not the same type of player, but they're in the same tier, as well as they operate in a similar area. CJ's a guard and Tobias is a power forward, but they're both basically just pretty efficient 20-point scorers who don't do that much outside of that. Another trade that I thought of that selfishly I wanted because I'm a Bulls fan, because I really actually want Ben Simmons on my team in spite of all the criticism around him right now, that would be that the Pacers get something like Kobe White and a few picks. The Bulls get Ben Simmons and the Sixers get Malcolm Brogdon as well as TJ Warren. Now TJ Warren and Tobias Harris is even more so a little bit redundant because I think they're even more alike than CJ and Tobias, but again, I still think that's fine, and still good shooting, still good scoring, so at the end of the day, it works. If you'd make that deal, your point guard situation is figured out, but we're gonna go ahead and say that the CJ trade happens because that's one of those moves that seems pretty much inevitable. And what's very ironic about that is a year ago, I said that Harden for Ben Simmons was inevitable. Look how well that aged, because first of all, it didn't happen, but second of all, we've gone from Ben Simmons can be traded for James Harden to Ben Simmons can be traded for a guy who hasn't even technically been an all-star. But if you do that CJ Covington trade, now you have the issue of you actually don't have a playmaker, really. You have some guys who can do like playmaking by committee, and honestly, that's probably what you're going to end up having to do, but it's not the best. You will potentially just rely on Tyrese Maxey to make a big leap. If he could make a big leap second year, that would make a world of difference as a playmaker, as a shooter, as a defender, and an on-ball creator where you need it. If you have CJ and Tobias, I don't think you need him to be like an 18-point-per-game scorer, but like a solid 14 would be cool while being a good playmaker and spotting up well, being a good defender. There is kind of an ability to make a trade. However, I'm not actually sure what the trade is. There's only one that I could think of, and it's pretty damn unrealistic. I don't think it would really go through. That would be you trade George Hill's money after you guarantee his contract, as well as Matisse Thybulle and Shake Milton to the Toronto Raptors for a Kyle Lowry sign and trade. The problem with that is you don't really have the money to where that's only getting you to about $14 million a year. And I don't think that Kyle Lowry would want to do a sign and trade for that amount of money. So that's not likely. However, if he did want to go there, because if I'm remembering correctly, he's from Philadelphia, he's had ties to them in the past for sure. If you were able to make Kyle Lowry happen, that would be fantastic, but I think that one's a bit of a stretch. But other than that, the one flaw with this Ben Simmons trade is that you are pretty much relying on Tyrese Maxey to take a leap, or it's just George Hill, who is a good spot shooter, but really not a playmaker, and you're gonna have a little bit of issue actually moving the basketball. That being said, maybe Rick Carlisle as the head coach could implement some sort of offensive system where there's a lot of passing, despite the fact that there's no clear passing talent here, which would be different from what he's done in the past for sure, but it's not impossible that he has some sort of scheme like that. But it would have to be a situation like that where you're figuring out the playmaking despite not having some great natural playmaker, which is possible to do. It's just not as easy as it could be. After that, your lineup is Maxey, CJ, Covington, Tobias, and Embiid. And if you don't make a point guard trade, which you probably wouldn't, you have George Hill, Shake Milton, Matisse Thybulle, and Korkmaz off of the bench. This team might not be better pure talent-wise than what the Sixers are right now, and especially what they were back when they had Jimmy Butler. but it is a much better fit than what they have right now, for sure. And I'm someone who really values fit, and especially after this series, I think it's pretty clear the Sixers need to focus on fit over talent, and I think that's what these moves are doing. And I guarantee you that this roster, with Embiid playing at the MVP level that he has ever since the start of this season, wouldn't lose to the fucking Atlanta Hawks. This blueprint is pretty simple. It's clear that the Sixers need to fire Doc Rivers and trade Ben Simmons. How they actually go about doing that, we'll have to wait and see. That's up to Daryl Morey, but that's how I'd approach it as a dipshit YouTuber who isn't a general manager. So there you go. Shout out to Rudy for editing this video. That is the end of this video. Please be sure to like, subscribe for NBA content like this, and cue the outro music.